Hello and welcome to our e-commerce web chat on Payment is a Product, a Journey Through Data. We are joined by Daniel Marovitz, who is a VP of Global Payments and member of the leadership group at Booking.com, the world's largest online travel site. The payment group is responsible for building all payment processes and products that support customers and partners in bookings, travel and experience marketplace in 190 countries. Previously worked at Earthport and Deutsche Bank, to name but a few. We are going to be discussing the key drivers in e-commerce. First we're going to look at the scale and dynamics of Booking.com, which is an unusual company in many, many different ways. Dan, can you explain what Booking.com's like? Because it's very different from Deutsche and Earthport, who you've worked for before.
Indeed. Well, first of all, Jack, great to be here with you. And Booking.com. Booking is a very interesting business. It is a marketplace. It is fostering a marketplace to enable transactions between buyers and sellers in the travel space. Historically, very much in the hotel category, which is where Booking has grown and grown and grown and become absolutely the world's most dominant player in that sector, but increasingly across a whole range of products which are in the travel and experience space. So rentalcars.com, a business based in Manchester in England, has now been integrated into Booking as Booking Go. And we cover now many, many categories, including things like resorts, bed and breakfast, properties which are rented out by their owners, ski, et cetera, et cetera. And so it really covers all range of accommodation globally and many other categories as well, and growing. We are one of the world's most global businesses. We're doing business in 192 countries and territories. And if you think about most of the e-commerce sites, that very large scale e-commerce sites that you hear about, what's quite different about Booking is that our merchants are really accessible to any of our buyers. I'll explain what I mean. If you think about Amazon, and obviously Amazon is a business that everybody who works on the web admires and respects from so many perspectives, but Amazon is really a collection of national or local, or in some cases regional stores. It isn't really a global site. So a US customer who goes to Amazon.com, reading the site in English, buying in US dollars, is pretty unlikely to buy something from Amazon.de in Germany in euros and from German suppliers. And the reverse is also true. So, the ecosystems that Amazon builds, while there are many, and those exist around the world, the participants in each ecosystem tend to be local. If you contrast that with Booking, it's pretty stark. Part of our business, if you will, in the travel space, part of our business is to take our customers and send them around the world. And so, although we don't have too many bookers from Paraguay who are going to stay in New Zealand, it's certainly possible, and it does happen. And so really, our 1.7 million properties across the world are very potentially bookable by any of our customers, of which there are a couple 100 million. So it's a very interesting marketplace in that it's so global, so cross-border, so cross-currency. Just a few things to understand about Booking. So we're about 17,000 people worldwide. About 9,000 of those people are customer service, doing customer service on the phone and over email in 43 languages. We do about 1.5 million bookings a day, and we're circa 2,500 people in engineering and product development. And at Booking, as in many of the kind of larger e-commerce companies, product and technology are integrated. So we don't really separate technology and product into different things. We work as integrated product and technology teams.
So that's the structure of Booking.com and the dynamics of your global business. But you've got some key values that drive everything underneath that.
Absolutely. So I think Booking is perhaps not unique, but in a very small group of companies, which is absolutely, positively religiously dedicated to data. So, at Booking, good ideas, innovative ideas are kind of interesting, but not something that generates a lot of excitement. What generates excitement is, can you devise an experiment to test your idea? And does the experiment show a positive signal? Does it show positive results? And is what you have hypothesized, is it something which could scale? So could we take it to 20 million customers, or is it something niche? And so at Booking, we have a very creatively named piece of software, which is called the Experiment Tool, and something that was built over many, many years and continues to evolve here at Booking. And we run roughly 1,000 experiments a week in the Experiment Tool to test ideas and or optimize products and optimize experience. So they could be very trivial things or seemingly trivial things, like changing the color of a buy it now button to be slightly more red and slightly less yellow. It could be changing the size of the font. It could be changing the order of operations in a checkout screen, a bit more sophisticated, or it could be much larger ideas. But we're running, as I said, roughly 1,000 experiments a week. We have quite a large group of data scientists who are working to tabulate and graph and explain the results of those experiments. And the results of those experiments are really what drive the business. So how we decide what to do and where to focus energy comes from what we see in the Experiment Tool.
And then another value is this consistent user interface, which everybody talks about. Well, what does it mean in Booking?
So I would say that there may be two religions at Booking. One is data and experimentation, and the second is conversion. So, and I don't mean religious conversion, but here what I mean by conversion is, we spend money to drive somebody to the site through some form of web advertising, or somebody who is a loyal Booking customer just types booking.com and shows up. And the question for us is, as soon as somebody arrives, how do we convert them to a purchase? How do we take them through the funnel of the sales process and get them to actually buy? That process of driving conversion and respecting those things which help or hurt conversion is a key focus. And therefore, things which disrupt the user interface and therefore disrupt user experience are very likely to have negative impact on conversion and be something that we want to avoid.
So that then leads you to what treasurers only think about, which is the impact of payments, but you have a much broader version and understanding.
So I would say that what's interesting first and foremost about Booking is that we are a marketplace. So we're not a traditional merchant. So treasurers that are listening to this who work for a traditional merchant where you own a product, somebody buys it, and you ship it, whether it's a virtual ship because it's software, or whether it's goods that you put in a box and put on the back of a truck to get to people. You're in control of one side of the marketplace, and you have to work to generate demand. In the Booking business, we have a two-sided marketplace, and we sit in the middle. We have to generate demand for our products, and we have to generate supply. And so we have this kind of split personality in how we operate. Really almost everything in the company, people who are facing off to hotels and other partners which provide services into the marketplace, and people who face off to the customers who are purchasing. And from a payments perspective, obviously, it adds a lot of complexity because we have buyers and sellers in radically different locations, which means different banking systems, different payment instruments, different cultures and practice around payment, and also, of course, different currency.
If we move to the second slide, where we look at payment, as you say, a very damn phrase, a payment is a product, a journey through data. Can you explain, because this is alien to the way I think of payments?
Yeah. So, our payments. So my whole payments organization does not sit in finance. It sits in product. And the reason why that's fundamentally important is that the single most emotional, psychologically complex, most sensitive marketing moment in a buyer's journey is the payment. That's where you put your money where your mouth is. That's where what was browsing behavior becomes buying behavior. And so if you don't treat that payment moment with the same respect that you treat every other part about somebody learning about your product, you make a grave mistake, because the internet and e-commerce is littered with the so-called abandoned shopping cart. People who spent an hour, looked at a bunch of stuff, put it in the basket, looked a little more, and then left the session without buying anything. And so if you want to have more things that not only get stuck in the basket, but actually get purchased, you have to treat payment as a product. And the user experience around payment, you have to treat with as much respect as the photography on your website, as the copy on your website, as the FAQs that you send customers to. So I think that's the first thing I would say. And that's a philosophical position that I think you have to take if you want to win in e-commerce generally.
If that's a mind shift, that is a fundamental mind shift, thinking about payments.
Well, I think the question you need to ask yourself is, how many graphic designers and usability people work on other parts of your website, and how many focus on payments? Often what happens is that you have this beautifully designed website with fantastic ad copy and gorgeous photography. And then as soon as somebody clicks checkout, the screen, you get redirected to a payments page that looks like it was written in 1995, doesn't inspire confidence, is not only not inspiring of confidence, but ugly, perhaps confusing, hard to navigate, and often, even just from the perspective that the look and feel looks different, makes people nervous because they think it's fraudulent. If your website has one look and feel, one kind of style, one color structure, one type of photography, and then the payments page looks like it comes from another company, which, by the way, often it does, because you go to a merchant acquirer's so-called hosted payment page, and the experience completely changes. It's like throwing somebody into a cold bathtub, and it's quite shocking. And we've done a great job of teaching consumers that if something doesn't look right online, it probably isn't right, and maybe you don't want to put your credit card there. So I think often not only is it a lousy experience, but it's actually a suspicion-generating experience by changing the UX that a customer experiences when they go from the shopping part to the paying part of your website.
That's all wrapped up in this need continuity through the whole process, from the first moment they hit the website all the way through to, and as you're going to say later, beyond payment.
That's right. I mean, the experience has to be cohesive, and the most sensitive moment is the payments moment. That's the most emotional moment, right? I always think about the fact that the enormous corpus of data that Google is sitting on, because they see what everybody's searching, what everybody's browsing. And of course, that's a powerful source of data. There's no question about it. But people's browsing behavior and their purchasing behavior are sometimes correlated, but not always, right? There are a lot of people who spend a lot of time browsing Ferraris on the weekend and looking at, old classic car auction sites, and they ain't never buying a Ferrari. What's more interesting and more indicative of somebody's demographic connection or demographic membership, if you will, is not just what they browse, but what they buy.
How do you test that experience? I know you can't give away the shop completely, but how does a corporate treasurer test that experience? Know that Amex doesn't work very well, Visa does, or one of the Chinese payment systems work even better. How do you test this?
Well, I think the key is that you have to test it in the same way that you would A/B test whether a 10% discount or a 15% discount for a first-time buyer when they come to your website generates more sales in the course of a day. You also need to check whether you have more or fewer abandoned shopping carts when Amex as your first payment option versus your Visa card. Well, what font are you using? How big is the font? How many items are in the drop-down box? All those things can influence the purchase that somebody makes. And of course, this question of using marketing techniques for financial benefit is really important. We all know that in the vast, vast majority of cases, a credit card is going to cost you more as a merchant than a debit card. Well, why do you put credit card options right at the top? Maybe if you put debit card options right at the top and credit card buried a little bit lower, the consumer might be indifferent to whether it's credit or debit, and you might be able to influence what payment instrument people choose, and therefore change your bottom line in a not insignificant way just by making a graphic design change.
You're touching on something that's fascinating me for years, is the omni-channel payment experience. Do you have to offer all payment systems, or can I just offer one?
Well, I think that comes back to testing again, right? And different dynamics, different countries, different products, different price points generate different sorts of behavior. And I think you need to be sensitive to the fact that what works for you in Germany may not work for you in the UK. So for example, I'm talking to you from the Netherlands. Good luck if you come to the Netherlands. Obviously, very prosperous, very technology focused, advanced Western European country. Good luck using a Visa card in the Netherlands. Very unlikely that you'll find anywhere that accepts a Visa card. And American Express, you may as well come in a spaceship from Mars. The Netherlands, outside of high-end hotels and restaurants and the most touristic of tourist areas, uses a local debit card structure, which is unique to the Netherlands.
So how do you get to saying purchase is not the end of the sale? Because surely it is. You've got your money. What else do you need to do?
Well, look, I think it depends on the kind of product that you're selling. What's, of course, complicated and difficult to manage in the travel sector is that it has a number of characteristics which are very different from the rest of e-commerce. So for the most part in e-commerce, you think about Amazon Prime, you order it today, you'll have it by tomorrow. You order it today, you'll have it by 5 o'clock today. In the future, you order it today and it's delivered by drone to your front door in 45 minutes. Well, in the hotel business or the flights business or other parts of transport, you book today and you're actually not going to consume the product for 5 or 6 months. And in the hotel business, there's lots of opportunity in many properties to cancel before you get to the actual time of the stay, and to cancel without any penalty. And obviously, you don't want them to cancel, because if they cancel, I don't get paid, right? So we earn a commission when somebody actually stays. So, how you manage that process is really important. And I think even for physical goods retail, recognizing that, somebody could have had a bad experience with delivery, which is actually nothing to do with you. It's a third-party outsourced service, but because they've had a bad experience, they feel badly about the product and they're more likely to return. So I think recognizing that it's not the end and the kind of customer service and duty of care continues, both to minimize threat and to create new opportunities for additional sales or for kind of add-ons, as in the case of ours business. We've sold you a hotel room. Now, can we get you a train ticket? Can we get you a museum ticket for the time that we know you're going to be in Rome? Those are very interesting.
So you keep on coming up with marketing and positioning and product ideas, and your particular department, even though it's global payment departments, is in the product department. Should finance be in charge of payments in e-commerce?
I really don't think so. Obviously, you need to have a tight partnership with finance. That's critical, and we certainly do. I spend a lot of time with finance people. A lot of finance people spend a lot of time in team meetings and in our senior level team meetings and team meetings throughout the organization. That's critical, right? And I think if you lose that linkage, obviously you've got trouble, particularly in a world where fraud situations can develop quite quickly, quite violently, and you have to be on top of it. and that takes a lot of coordinated effort to keep your store safe. But I would say that you need to treat the discipline that comes from product management thinking, the discipline around product development and testing and user experience. Those are not the kind of characteristics that we normally think about in a finance department. And I think that's why all of us as consumers have had so many experiences which are so disjointed. You know, what I described before, that the experience on the store selecting and learning about products and the experience paying for them, it feels like you're dealing with two completely different organizations.
Well, in a way, you are dealing with different departments.
Absolutely.
So if you bring all this together, what would be your overall comment to treasurers and finance people about e-commerce?
Payment is a part of the experience. You have to test and learn and optimize. Your payment experience is never done. There are always things you can do to be safer and smarter about fraud prevention and fraud detection. There are always things you can do to improve conversion. And you need to use the discipline and the thought process of a product development person and a marketer to win the war ultimately for generating more business by making sure that more people get through and are able to pay and become your happy customer.
So where does this leave the corporate treasurer because they still have some responsibility? What's the corporate treasurer left with?
Well, look, I think that you don't need to be doctrinaire about saying that payments need to be in the product department necessarily. I just think that the skills that I just described are more likely to be found there than they are in a treasury finance function. I think what's most important is that it's about the discipline and the approach that you take, which will create the right sort of experience. I think that's the key. So, you know, I think as a treasurer, you know, to thine own self be true. If you think you have the ability to drive a process like the one I described, then by all means you can own payments. If you think that that's not likely what you or your department's culture is really about, then you should send the payments function on its merry way. What is also clear, though, is that, you know, finance has a role to play, of course. Ultimately, you know, payments are about collections and disbursements, and, you know, somebody's got to be in charge of the purse. And in an increasingly cross-border world where you have companies that have content or software as a service or product as a service business where the suppliers or the consumers can be anywhere on earth, the sophistication and the requirement to think about foreign exchange is deeper and more complex than ever. And I think will create plenty of fun for treasurers out there.
Thank you, Don. Fascinating as always, and some fundamental points about how to drive an e-commerce program right across your company. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Always a pleasure. Take care.